I'm not the kind of person who looks for a fight. I came out here to heal animals and maybe myself. But then one day I realized someone was stealing the water off my land. Those smug faces over at the Summit Creek Villas, HOA, dug a pipeline straight through my property. No permission, no notice, just entitlement. While I was hauling barrels of water to keep my livestock alive, they were watering imported grass and filling fountains. So I did the only thing I had the right to do. I shut it off. And when 342 homes woke up to bone-dry faucets in the middle of a 104-degree heat wave, they finally learned, never mess with a woman who owns the source. By the way, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and tell me your city. My name is Dr. Emily Carter. A year ago, I was a full-time veterinarian running a busy animal clinic in Denver. Life was loud, organized, and exhausting, but at least it made sense. Until the night my world ended. A drunk driver ran a red light. My husband, Mason, never made it home. We had dreams. Someday we'd leave the city, slow down, and start a ranch for rescue animals. That's why he bought this place. 10 quiet acres just outside Willow Creek, Colorado. It was his dream. I just never thought I'd be the one to live it alone. 6 months after the funeral, I packed up everything and drove here. I wasn't running. I was reaching for something to hold on to that still felt like him. The ranch was in rough shape. Old fences, weeds up to my knees, and a barn that hadn't seen life in years. But the land was peaceful. It smelled like cedar and memory. I started small, fixed the roof, took in a pair of abused horses, a goat with a broken leg, a one-eyed cat named Marvin who hates everyone but me. It was quiet work, healing work. Then came the drought. Wells across the county were drying up. I began rationing water, short showers, buckets for the animals, no washing machine. My deep well held out, but just barely. Every drop mattered. That's when I noticed something strange. It was early morning. I was checking the south fence when I saw it. Damp earth in a place that hadn't seen rain in weeks. The soil was darker, freshly turned. I knelt down. The dirt had been disturbed. Recently. Clean lines packed down with just enough debris to look natural. I grabbed a shovel and dug 2 feet. There it was, a fresh PVC pipeline running straight from my old well house toward the woods and beyond into Summit Creek Villas. Their HOA never asked, never called, never even knocked on my door. I followed the line through the trees. That's when I found it, a concealed pumping station hidden behind decorative shrubs, pulling water from my land and sending it into their underground system, feeding their fountains, their artificial lake, their pristine lawns. They didn't just tap into my water. They built a system with gauges, filters, even an electrical panel, all on stolen ground. And they thought I wouldn't notice? I took photos, every pipe, every fitting, every wire, and then I made a decision. That night I sat on the porch, lit a cigarette I hadn't touched in years, and made a short list. Step 1, confirm the theft. Step 2, follow the pipe. Step 3, I didn't warn them. I didn't knock. I just cut the damn thing. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't fight. They were wrong, because I'm not just some widow with a few goats and a bad memory. I'm the woman who owns the land. And now, I own the war. The morning after I cut the pipeline, I half expected sirens. Instead, I got silence. No knock, no phone call, not even an email. But by noon, the HOA's version of the cavalry arrived. 2 men in khakis and polos, clipboards in hand, pretending to be from Summit Creek Maintenance. They stood at the edge of my property like they were waiting for a tour. I didn't give them one. "You're trespassing," I said, stepping out of the barn, gloves still on. "Turn around." They hesitated. Then one of them, the younger one, cleared his throat. "We're here to inspect some irrigation concerns tied to the shared watershed." "There is no shared watershed," I snapped. "There's my well, on my land, and a stolen pipe that no longer exists. If you want access again, tell your boss to knock." With a lawyer, they left. 3 hours later, I got a call. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then I heard her voice. "Hi, Emily. This is Cynthia Langford from the Summit Creek HOA. I'd love to clear up any misunderstandings over a cup of tea." We believe in neighborly solutions. Call me back. Neighborly solutions. Coming from the same woman who ordered a pipeline through my property without asking? No thanks. Still, I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. So when an official-looking envelope showed up 2 days later, I was ready. A formal invitation to mediation at the Summit Creek Community Center. I brought a friend, Sarah Kim, an environmental lawyer I'd met through the State Veterinary Board. Sharp mind, sharper tongue. We walked into the center's conference room like we owned the place. Cynthia was waiting, sitting at the head of the table like she was running a board meeting. She wore a cream blazer and a forced smile. Her nails were perfect. Her nerves were not. "Emily," she said, standing, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." I didn't take it. "This is Sarah Kim," I said. "She's here to make sure no more of my property gets stolen under the name of community improvement." Cynthia's eyes tightened. "Of course. Well, let's keep this friendly." Sarah smiled. "Friendly is easy when you're not breaking the law." The conversation that followed was a dance. Cynthia played innocent, claimed the pipeline had been there for years, blamed a miscommunication between her facilities manager and the landscaping contractor, claimed she believed the well was abandoned. "I saw water coming from it," I said flatly. "That's not abandonment. That's theft." She offered a mutual solution. They'd pay a small monthly access fee if I signed a retroactive easement agreement. It was laughable. "You want to legalize the pipeline you built illegally by paying me $200 a month?" I asked. "It's more than fair," she said. "You weren't using that water at full capacity anyway." Sarah leaned forward. "You tapped into her well without a permit. You built infrastructure on her land. You diverted resources to inflate your property values. And you charged your residents special water assessments for it. That's not a misunderstanding. That's fraud." Cynthia bristled. "I don't appreciate being threatened. And we don't appreciate being robbed," Sarah said calmly. "So let's talk about consequences." We laid it out. Photos of the pipeline, coordinates of the unauthorized trenching, documents showing no permits, no easements, no legal right. Screenshots of Summit Creek's newsletter charging residents $300 per quarter for independent water upgrades. Cynthia paled slightly. "This is all very aggressive." "No," I said. "What's aggressive is pumping water out of someone's land and calling it landscaping." She tried one more tactic, sympathy. "You've been through a lot, Emily. Losing your husband, adjusting to life out here alone. Maybe this isn't the battle you want." "Wrong move," I stared her down. "You're right. I've been through hell. And the difference between you and me? I walked out of it stronger. You're standing in a nice dress over a sinkhole of your own making." Sarah stood. "We're done here. You'll be hearing from us formally." As we turned to leave, Cynthia said quietly, "You think this ends with a saw and a lawyer?" "You don't know who I know." I paused in the doorway. "No," I said, "but you're about to find out who I am." The next morning it began. I started getting strange visits. County inspectors citing anonymous complaints about the smell from my barn, the placement of my fencing, the condition of my roof. One even asked if I was running an unlicensed animal operation. Every one of them left empty-handed. My papers were in order. My permits were clean. But the message was clear. Cynthia wasn't done. Fine. Neither was I. Sarah filed a formal cease and desist. We reported the HOA's unauthorized use of private land and misappropriation of water fees to the county, and I started compiling every shred of evidence I had. Photos, maps, timestamps. Then I got a call. Blocked number. A whispering voice. "My name's Mike. I live in Summit Creek. I can't talk long, but they've been charging us for that water. Told us it was from a new well on HOA land. A lot of us are starting to ask questions." And just like that, Cynthia's grip started to crack. It didn't take long for the silence to break. 2 days after the confrontation at the community center, rumors began swirling through Summit Creek like wildfire on dry grass. The residents had questions, real ones. And for the first time, they weren't accepting Cynthia's answers. I didn't have to knock on their doors. They started knocking on mine. First was Mike Hansen, a quiet man in his 50s who lived near the development's main entrance. He showed up at my gate one evening, holding a rolled-up newsletter in one hand and a look of quiet guilt in the other. "I can't be seen talking to you long," he said. But I thought you should know. They've been charging us water infrastructure fees for over a year now. Said it was for a new eco-filtration system. But no one's ever seen it. He handed me the newsletter. Highlighted in yellow was the breakdown. $300 per quarter per household, listed as independent water upgrade for sustainable access. 340 homes. I did the math. They were pulling nearly $400,000 a year to maintain a system they'd built illegally with my water. Mike continued, voice low. Some of us are getting suspicious, but we don't have proof. We don't even know where the water comes from. Until now. That was the match. Over the next week, more residents came forward. Anonymously, cautiously, but they came. Sarah and I compiled everything. Documents, statements, newsletters, invoices, and old meeting minutes leaked by someone inside the HOA. Each one pulled back the curtain further. Cynthia hadn't just stolen water. She'd stolen money from her own people. She'd lied, faked permits, signed my husband's name on a forged water access agreement, dated just months before his death. When I saw the signature, I didn't even need a handwriting expert. I knew Mason's hand like I knew the shape of his wedding ring. He would never have signed this, and certainly not for what they offered. $1. That was the price listed for easement access compensation. That's when the line broke inside me. This wasn't just about land. It wasn't even about water anymore. It was about disrespect, about erasing someone who could no longer defend himself. So we did what Mason would have done. We told the truth, loud and clear. My sister Jennifer, an investigative journalist down in Austin, took everything we gave her and put together a full expose. HOA diverts water from Widow's Ranch and charges residents to hide it. It went live on a Thursday night. By Friday morning, it had over 80,000 views and was being quoted on 3 local news sites. By Saturday, there were reporters outside my ranch gate, and by Sunday morning, Summit Creek residents called for an emergency meeting. I didn't attend, but I watched the live stream. Mike stood up, holding a copy of the report. "Why are we paying for something we don't own?" he asked. "And why are we stealing water from the one neighbor we've never bothered to speak to?" Someone else brought up the fake signature. Then the missing $200,000 in miscellaneous maintenance funds. Cynthia tried to take control, but the room wasn't hers anymore. A vote was called, unanimous. She was removed as president. Richard Coleman, her silent second in command, resigned minutes later. The new interim president, Lisa Thompson, requested a formal audit and said publicly, "We need to make things right with our residents and with the land we wronged." She called me the next morning. No lawyers, just her. She didn't apologize for Cynthia, but she apologized for staying silent. "We should have asked questions sooner. We didn't, but we're ready now." I appreciated her honesty, but I wasn't done. Because while they were scrambling to rebuild trust, I discovered something that made all of this seem like child's play. Sarah brought me a thin notice from the county records office. Buried deep in the paperwork, almost missed, was a small announcement. The headwaters of the creek on my property, the original spring, were being prepared for auction. The spring that fed the entire watershed. If someone else bought it, they could control the flow, redirect it, own the very thing Cynthia had tried to take behind my back. And guess who had requested the sale? An LLC tied to Richard Coleman. Cynthia had lost the vote, but she hadn't lost the game. Not yet. That's when I made a decision. I didn't just want justice. I wanted to make damn sure no one could ever take what was ours again. So I bought it. Quietly, legally. With Sarah's help in a hidden LLC, I made the only bid. No one saw it coming. I bought the source. And then I shut off their supply. Not to punish, but to protect. Because sometimes people don't learn until the water stops running. And sometimes the only way to be heard is to let silence speak. The morning after I shut off the valve, I poured myself a glass of water from the kitchen tap. Cold, clean, mine. Meanwhile, 342 homes in Summit Creek Villas began their day with nothing but air in the pipes and rising panic. By noon, their fountains had stopped. By evening, sprinklers dried to silence. And by the next morning, residents were filling buckets at gas stations, demanding answers. Cynthia wasn't answering calls anymore. She had vanished, along with nearly $250,000 in HOA reserve funds. Jennifer's updated report made the front page of 3 major outlets across the state. Headline: HOA President Disappears as Water Crisis Unfolds. Fraud and forgery alleged. But that was just the beginning. The city council called an emergency meeting. The mayor stepped in, and so did the district attorney. An investigation was opened, and when the handwriting expert confirmed Mason's signature had been forged, the charges escalated: fraud, embezzlement, illegal utility installation, and tampering with protected water sources. They even found records of Cynthia using HOA funds to pay off the county inspector, Thomas Green, the same man who claimed I had environmental violations on my land. He was arrested the same afternoon. And me? I didn't celebrate. I worked. I walked the fence line again, checked every inch of the creek bed, marked the spots where the pipeline used to be. Lisa Thompson, the new HOA president, met me halfway along the property line with a clipboard and her sleeves rolled up. "We want to make this right," she said. "Formally, fairly." She wasn't like Cynthia. There was no perfume, no smile laced with threat. Just an honest neighbor who realized too late what had been done in her name. We sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours. By the end of that meeting, we had a new agreement. The HOA would pay fair market value for controlled access to a portion of the water. Every drop would be metered, documented, and regulated. The illegal pipeline would be permanently removed under county supervision, and the community would issue a formal, public apology for the theft and harassment. Not a favor, not a handout, a contract, signed, sealed, and earned. Mike Hansen led a group of volunteers from Summit Creek to help repair the damage. They filled the trenches, planted trees along the creek bed, even built a wooden sign at the shared property line. This land flows because it's shared. It made me stop, because for the first time in months, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming something deeper: respect, trust, community. With part of the settlement money, I modernized the ranch's irrigation system. Solar-powered, water-efficient, self-regulated. Mason would have loved it. And with the rest, I created something new: the Carter Conservation Trail, a 3-acre nature education space where local kids could learn about land stewardship, water systems, and what it means to protect what matters. The first class walked the trail in late fall. They touched the cold water, watched birds feed near the creek, and asked questions about where water comes from and where it goes. And as I stood watching them, I realized I hadn't just defended the ranch. I'd built something stronger than fences: a legacy. 1 year after the pipeline was cut, the land is healing. So is the town, and so am I. Some scars remain on the trees, on the soil, and on my memory. But I carry them with pride now, because in a world where people like Cynthia think they can take whatever they want and call it progress, someone has to say, no, not this land, not this time. It's funny how a fight for water became something so much more. When Mason bought this land, he didn't do it for investment. He didn't do it for status. He did it for silence, for breath, for mornings where the only sound was the wind moving through the trees. And now I understand why. This ranch was never about owning something. It was about belonging to something. For months, I thought I was fighting for boundaries, for justice, for revenge. But standing here now, a year later, with the water flowing clean and free, I see it clearly. I was fighting to protect his last gift to me. Not the land, not the well, but the belief that something honest, something whole, was still worth defending. The day we officially opened the Carter Conservation Trail, I planted a small oak sapling near the creek, right where the illegal pipeline used to run. I didn't tell anyone what it meant, but it's from an acorn Mason picked up years ago on one of our hikes. I found it tucked in the glove box of his old truck, still wrapped in a napkin. That oak will outlive me, maybe even outlive this story. And that's the point. We think legacy is built in big moments: headlines, court wins, money changing hands. But real legacy, it's a quiet thing, a line drawn in the dirt that says, this far, no further. It's a child on a field trip dipping their hands in a creek they now know belongs to everyone. It's a widow planting something that grows long after grief stops blooming. Summit Creek still stands. Some residents left, others stayed. but now they know where their water comes from. They know whose hands dug the trenches and whose hands filled them in. And they know there's a woman up the hill with a barn full of animals, a backbone of steel, and a husband whose voice still whispers in the wind. Mason didn't leave me money. He didn't leave me instructions. He left me a place and the courage to fight for it. I used to wonder what I was supposed to do with all this pain. Now I know. Turn it into something that outlives you. That's the legacy. That's the story. And that's what water taught me. Some stories don't end with victory. They end with understanding. This wasn't just a tale about water rights or winning against a corrupt HOA. It was about holding on to something that matters when the world tells you to let go. It was about a woman who turned grief into grit and silence into something loud enough for the world to hear. We share stories like this not because they're perfect, but because they're real, messy, personal, transformative. If you've ever felt powerless, if someone has ever tried to take something from you, your voice, your worth, your roots, remember, you're stronger than they know. Sometimes doing what's right doesn't feel like justice right away, but over time it becomes a legacy. This is just one of many emotional stories we tell. Stories where quiet heroes rise, where narrated stories reveal strength beneath stillness, where lives change, fates turn, and truth is finally spoken. These are unraveled fates. If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. Remind someone you know that standing up, no matter how small the fight, can still shake the ground. And if you want to hear more, follow us. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones we almost didn't tell.